It is Monday. It is April 1st, April Fool's Day, but today is not a day for fools. This is going to be what I call possibly one of the greatest women's college basketball games ever tonight. And here on the Rich Eisen Show, talk about it with me, Sabreena Merchant, the Athletics women's basketball staff writer. Sabreena, I am so excited to talk to you because I've watched a lot of women's college basketball through my years, and you've had the UConn years, obviously South Carolina's dominance over the last couple of seasons, what LSU has been able to do. Caitlin Clark has been amazing. But tonight, for some reason, it just feels so much bigger, especially the way that last year ended with LSU and Iowa in that national championship game. I wish the game tonight was actually in the Final Four, even a championship rematch for a championship. But tonight, how would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you put this matchup between LSU and Iowa?
I think the only thing preventing it from being a 10 is the fact that it's an Elite Eight game and not a
Yeah.
national title game. So probably a 9 because you have the star power of Angel Reese and everybody on LSU, Flajay Johnson, Michaela Williams, Haley Van Lith, obviously Kim Mulkey, a star in and of herself. And Caitlin Clark is the biggest player probably in college sports. So the only problem here is that we still have to play 3 more games after this one happens.
You know, how did we get here with both of these programs, though? Because we knew there were going to be a collision course, and you would hope that we would have this matchup. It does happen, but for the way for Caitlin Clark and all that she's accomplished to be here, for LSU to get back into this situation, to have another opportunity at another Final Four, for both of these teams, programs to have to go through the seasons they had with basically the bullseye on their back just to be here, I think is an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell every time Iowa played, whether it was at home or on the road, they were getting a team's best shot. I mean, they sold out every arena they went in, other than a couple of those Thanksgiving tournaments, when attendance is just a little different in those tiny gyms. But like people are doing Caitlin Clark's, now you see me against her, like every time they're defending her well. Just the hype that opposing crowds get when they play Iowa, that was definitely a target on their back the entire season. And LSU, I mean, from the very first game of the season against Colorado, it was teams trying to punk them and show that their championship was a bit of a fluke, and they've had to play the entire season under that sort of tenor. It's been a miraculous ride because both teams are so different.
Right.
Uh, Iowa loses 2 of their front court starters from a year ago. LSU loses their point guard and center to graduation. You've got their current center who tore her ACL back in November. Just a lot of different moving parts that both of these teams have had to deal with. And the fact that they're both here at this point, I think, is just a testament to how good Angel is, how good Caitlin is, and just how much fun tonight is going to be.
Sabreena Merchant, she's the athletic women's basketball staff writer joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. Sabreena, it's funny that Don Staley, South Carolina, they're already in the Final Four. And it's like no one's really talking about them. I know they're the number 1 seed and they're undefeated. So, yes, they have all that going for them. But I feel like they're, can I say, a quiet 1 seed, because we expect them to be in the championship game. It's just of the teams that are remaining, whether it's North Carolina State, whether it's USC, whether it's UConn, LSU, Iowa, who is going to take down South Carolina?
Yeah, and I think a part of it is that, you look at that Iowa LSU region and it was just, I mean, like the 4 teams that were remaining in the Sweet 16 could have been a Final Four by
Right.
themselves. Like, there was just so much talent in that region. So the fact that South Carolina got I'm not going to say an easy path to the Final Four, like everybody has to win the 4 games, but they got a more comfortable path to get back to this point. Um, Obviously, whoever wins this LSU Iowa game, I think, is going to put up a real fight if they get to a championship game against South Carolina. USC, led by Juju Watkins,
Mm.
has just rolling winners of their last 8 games. Have this really nice combination of obviously the freshman sensation, but also a lot of really good veteran talent that has come in as transfers and supported Juju and given her all the complementary pieces that they need to get to this point. And I don't want to overlook NC State either. Like Battle of the Carolinas, you've got
Hmm.
Sinai Rivers, point guard for NC State. She started her career at South Carolina, won a national championship there, and now gets to play against her former teammates. Like that's an awesome storyline. Um, I think South Carolina is still the favorite to cut the Nets down. But they played a lot more closer games than they
Right.
did at this point last year, and I honestly think that's to their benefit that they've had to execute in those situations. You're not going to see them look shell shocked like they did against Iowa in the Final Four last year when it was close in the fourth quarter. So I still think the Gamecocks are heavy favorites, regardless of what happens tonight with USC, UConn, and LSU, Iowa. But it is definitely a lot of fun to talk about the games that are taking place today.
Yeah, this has been a fun tournament. One that I feel like obviously the ratings are reflecting it. Some of the highest rated women's college basketball games that we've ever seen. And on top of that is, I'm looking at obviously Iowa LSU because that's the main game for today, but UConn USC, they've got star power as well. What makes the LSU-Iowa game is because there's a past, right? There's the rematch of the national championship. And so people may say that, well, it's the storylines that are pushing this game, Sabreena. But I'm looking around and I'm just looking at women's college basketball and I'm saying, wait, Full Wiley is a freshman. Juju Watkins is a freshman. Hidalgo's a freshman at Notre Dame. I'm looking at all of these women who they'll be back. And I get more than just one season and they're off to the WNBA. They're going to be back for 2, 3, 4 seasons. I'm now starting to fall in love with the brands of a lot of these women who are going to college basketball, and we get to watch them develop over the year. I think that's what the bigger power is that I've seen in this tournament.
Yeah, I think, the age rule does a lot of favors for women's college basketball because these teams get to build and you get to fall in love with the players and, travel with their journeys. Like we think
Right.
about Iowa 2 years ago, Caitlin Clark and Iowa lose in the second round on their home court, but the entire starting lineup comes back and we get to watch their run to the national title game. And then three starters return and they get this revenge chance against LSU, right? And they're playing against so many of the same players who are on that Tigers team. So it's fun to, we don't even see this in pro sports anymore with how much movement there is in free agency. Like there's a real continuity to a lot of these teams that allows you to latch on. And then you mentioned like this freshman class is just absolutely generational. It is ridiculous how much talent there is in these first year groups and just how much they're producing already. Like you mentioned, Full Wiley, Hidalgo, um, Madison Booker took her team
Yes.
to the Elite Texas. Obviously, they lost to NC State. But, even UConn, their best player is Paige Beckers, but they've got two freshmen in their starting lineup who are absolutely killing it in KK Arnold and Ashlyn Shade. Just every team you look at, there are freshmen who are producing immediately. I don't think we're going to see this every year with the freshman class. I do think the talent is getting better and better, but I think this is a special group that we're going to get to enjoy, for the next 3 years in college.
The Athletics women's basketball staff writer Sabreena Merchant joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. So we know we have the matchup at 7 p.m. Eastern time between LSU and Iowa, but then the nightcap. It's the second game, USC, UConn. Obviously, you have two outstanding programs. USC, it's kind of, you kind of scratch your head because every time you look up, it's like these new firsts, right, Sabreena? It's like first time USC's been to the Final Four since Cheryl Mill. I'm like, wow, like that's pretty incredible. And then obviously UConn and what they've been throughout women's college basketball. But that should be the story. But the story on the court will be, will the court be regulation size, though, Sabrina? Please help me out. But what's going on in Portland at the Moda Center this past weekend? Now some say a fan took the picture and sent it down and says, hey, this court is not regulation. It looks like there's some discrepancies. Will the discrepancies be fixed by tonight's matchup or tonight's tip-off between UConn and USC?
Yeah, this is absolutely one of the weirdest things I've ever seen
I've never
place
seen
on a
it.
basketball game. I mean, I've been in Portland the last 3 days,
Yeah.
and it's so wild to me that none of the players who were on the court when they were playing in practice or playing in games could feel that the three-point line was a little bit shorter on one side than it was on the other. From what I understand, the one that looks a little bit further away is actually the correct distance, and the one that's closer is about 6 inches, too close to the basket. But I mean, you're absolutely correct. Like there was a fan who noticed in the stands at the fifth game that has taken place at the
Yes.
site. The fifth game. So 4 games have taken place with an incorrect three-point line. And because the game is supposed to be on ABC yesterday, there's a certain window that ABC has booked for Texas NC State. The coaches thought, well, we'd rather play on NC State with a slightly maladjusted three-point line than have to wait and potentially get knocked off onto another channel because you talked about the ratings and
Right.
all of the inputs that has come, right? Like let's just play at our scheduled time when everybody's ready to watch us, as opposed to waiting an hour for somebody to potentially fix this. Uh, it's We've been told that the line is going to be fixed before tonight's game between USC and UConn. I mean, both of these teams have already played a game without the line being fixed, so there's that to deal with, and they seem to have shot just fine. But it's just a little frustrating. You think about all of the growth of the women's tournament, right? Like we're talking about all the storylines, all of
Right.
the interests, all of the fun that we've been having over the last 2 weeks, and the fact that the NCAA has a contractor that got this wrong and nobody chose to check it is really disappointing. And just there's been a couple of things, over the course of this tournament that the NCAA has just messed up. And it's just another sign of like, this would never happen on the men's side, right? Like they hop into all of these different arenas, right? Like they have a
Right.
different 3-point line than the NBA 3-point line. And we didn't see any problems at Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles or the American Airlines Center. Like they got it right. So there's no reason why this shouldn't be correct for the women's tournament.
Yeah, I trust. I understand completely because that should not be the story, but yet it is the story. And I think even I think with Hidalgo as well, she had her nose ring in, and
Exactly.
they stopped play, made her go to the bench. She had to sit down while her team kept playing, and she had to have her nose ring removed that she's played with all season long. And I'm like, why are we doing that now? She's the best player on the court. Notre Dame ends up losing that matchup as well, and so maybe could have cost Notre Dame an opportunity to advance in this tournament. There's so many things now that we're focusing on with the women's game. You've been covering it though, Sabreena. Like, I think the focus now is that how much better not just the game is, but how exciting it is, but how influential some of these players are that need to be out there on the floor.
Absolutely. I mean, Hannah Hidalgo had to sit for 4 minutes in the second quarter, and she was off like the rest of the way. Like you saw, she had one of her worst shooting games in
Right.
recent memory. And I have to believe part of it is because she's having like some sort of surgical operation happening to her on
Yes.
the sideline, right, during the start of the second quarter. And how do you only notice that in between the first and the second quarter? Is
Right.
like that's something that you're supposed to be checking for. Shouldn't it be addressed pregame? It's just the the inconsistency of the application of these rules, the fact that there like isn't, a set standard across all of the referees who are adjudicating this. It's frustrating that the players have to deal with all this nonsense. But I mean, like you said, overall, I think the tournament, just with the star power that we've had across all of these teams, like Caitlin Clark is going to be somebody we're going to be talking about for a very long time, right?
Right.
Like she's already been invited to Team USA camp. There's a good chance she makes the Olympic team. She's going to be a face of American basketball for a very long time. And the fact that she, could be joined on those teams in future years by Flau'jae Johnson and Juju Watkins and Paige Becker is like, it's so cool that they get to build their legacies against one another at this moment and then get to play against each other again and again and again. We just have this really cool moment of awesome talent, first of all. Like I think the talent has improved so much, but just the accessibility of these players is
Mhm.
awesome. Like the fact that they get to play on ABC and ESPN and the national title game is going to be on ABC again. We saw what kind of numbers that did when LSU played Iowa last year, and a peak of about 12 million viewers for that national title game. It's just a really cool inflection point in women's sports, and the players are absolutely ready to deliver what fans are looking for.
Just a couple more minutes here with the athletic women's basketball staff writer Sabreena Merchant here on the Rich Eisen Show. And Sabreena, I'll focus on the two games tonight again because these are the final two that will help us get the Final Four ready in Cleveland, Ohio, starting on Friday. The one thing I'm looking at with LSU and Iowa, there will be a winner, there will be a loser. Is it I'm trying to focus it in because there are some people who don't like the way that LSU's women a little more flamboyant, a little more in your face. Caitlin Clark, not necessarily reserved, but she's kind of America's darling when it comes to basketball. And I'm just trying to figure out. I know we both win tonight in watching this game, but is there a rooting favorite when it comes to? It seems like the public perceptions they want Iowa to win because they want more Caitlin Clark, and they're not really. They don't like the way that Kim Mulkey's LSU women's basketball team plays the game.
Yeah, I do wonder what the national perception of LSU were if they had a coach other than Kim Mulkey. I feel
Right.
like she expects some of that
Hmm.
to herself. But it's so interesting to me that Caitlin is regarded as America's sweetheart and darling because she talks just as much trash as
Right.
anybody on LSU. Uh, like we've seen all of the clips from her first round games in Iowa, slamming the ball in her face, talking to the refs. Like she is as emotional and demonstrative on the court as anybody. And I
Right.
think that's what makes her so compelling, right? You see how much this means to her in real time. And yeah, I think the national favorite is going to be Iowa. Like there's obviously a racial component baked into that, and
Right.
that's super unfortunate. But part of it is, in the rematch, you kind of want to see Iowa get their revenge on LSU, right? Like
Hmm.
they lost in that game last year. I think it would be, a more interesting storyline if they were to win and get to move forward after what happened in the national title game. Like this is Caitlin Clark's last season in college. For her to put the bow on what has been, one of the most decorated careers of all time, is obviously a really interesting story. The only thing left that's missing on her resume is a national title. So I can see why a lot of people would be rooting for Caitlin in that situation. But I mean, LSU, this is a program that won its first national title last year. Like they're
Hmm.
building something historic there. Angel could come back next year. Flage will come back. Michaela Williams is coming back. This is a team that's built for years to come. And I think like historical dominance, also a very cool storyline. And I like my players who, get into it and egg on the crowd and Angel throwing up the L after they beat UCLA, like that was a bit
Right.
corny to me, but it's funny. And Flau'jae Johnson, like she wins the national title, they're playing her song at the American Airlines Arena, like and
Yes.
she put along to it on the day. It's like that's so cool. So there's a lot of excellent personalities on LSU, and I get that they're a little bit more in your face than
Yeah.
women's stars in the past, but I think it's time we just get on board.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And then look, the nightcap again. Excuse me. USC, UConn. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter who wins. I think that we're going to see Gino and obviously his ball club, Paige Beckers, and what she had to go through last year to get back to this situation, maybe to a Final Four. Then you have the super freshman and Juju Watkins taking USC, bringing USC women's basketball back to prominence. It doesn't matter kind of who wins, but I feel like we all win in this scenario. But UConn could join North Carolina State and have both their men's programs and women's programs in the Final Four. So it's like you're dividing up fan bases, though, Sabreena. So it's like you're rooting for UConn, but at the same time, you're like, well, half their fan base has to be split between Cleveland and also in Phoenix due to the Final Fours in different locations.
I feel bad for their band directors too, because they have to split that part up. That's a lot of work, right? Like these
Right.
students, they're supporting their teams, and there's just not enough people to do both. In Cleveland and Phoenix, like you mentioned. Like honestly, there's a ton of fans around the country. I feel much worse for the band directors than I do for the fans who have to decide.
That's so funny, man. Well, Sabreena, you've been doing great in covering college basketball, women's college basketball, and basketball in general throughout the entire season. Big night tonight. We will be following you on X at Sabreena, SABR, 2 E's, NAJM on X. We'll be following you tonight. Enjoy Portland. Can't wait for the big matchups tonight. Thank you, Sabreena, for the time.
Thank you so much.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.